Imagine the most talkative general in American military history. A man who never met a microphone he didn't like, who swore at his own soldiers as a form of inspiration, who wrote in his diary almost every single day of the war, going completely, utterly, inexplicably silent. On October 14, 1944, one of the most famous soldiers in the entire world died. And George S. Patton, the man the entire German High Command considered America's most dangerous commander, the man who had studied his enemy obsessively, the man who never shut up about anything, said absolutely nothing. Not one word, not to the press, not to his wife, not to his staff, not even in his own private diary. Today, we're going to answer why and what that silence tells us about two of World War II's greatest legends. The death the world didn't understand. On the morning of October 14, 1944, two German generals arrived at a quiet house near Herrlingen, Germany. Their names were Wilhelm Burgdorf and Ernst Meisel, and they had not come to pay a social visit. They carried with them a death sentence, just not one written on paper. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, Germany's most celebrated soldier, the Desert Fox himself, was presented with three brutal options that morning. He could stand trial before the Nazi People's Court, where conviction was guaranteed, execution was certain, and his family would be dragged down with him. He could refuse and be arrested on the spot, with the same consequences for everyone he loved. Or he could swallow cyanide quietly, die within the hour, and Hitler would tell the world he had succumbed to wounds from an Allied airstrike 3 months earlier, leaving his family untouched and his reputation intact. Rommel had been implicated, whether accurately or not, in the July 20th plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler. The regime wanted him gone, but they also needed his legend. Killing him publicly would have shattered German morale, so they killed him privately instead. Rommel said goodbye to his wife and his 15-year-old son Manfred, put on his Afrika Korps uniform, the jacket that represented everything he had built, picked up his field marshal's baton, and got into Burgdorf's car. 15 minutes later, he was dead on a roadside. The German government announced his death the following day with a masterpiece of propaganda. Rommel, they said, had finally succumbed to the head injuries suffered when Allied aircraft attacked his staff car in Normandy back in July. He died a hero. Hitler ordered a national day of mourning. A lavish state funeral followed on October 18th. Field Marshal von Rundstedt delivered the eulogy before cameras and crowds. The world mourned a warrior. Almost nobody outside a handful of Nazi insiders knew they were actually witnessing the cover-up of a state murder. What Patton knew and what he didn't. To understand the silence, you need to understand what was actually happening to Patton in October 1944, and also what had never happened between him and Rommel at all. Here is the uncomfortable truth behind the Hollywood mythology. Patton and Rommel never fought each other. Not once. The famous image from the 1970 film Patton, the dramatic monologue about reading Rommel's book, the sense of two titans locked in personal combat, is cinematic invention. It's a great scene. It's also fiction. Rommel commanded the Afrika Korps from February 1941 until March 1943, when Patton arrived in North Africa in November 1942 and took command of 2nd Corps on March 6, 1943, just 3 days before Rommel departed Africa permanently on Hitler's orders, never to return. For those 3 days, they were technically in the same theater. Their forces never engaged. When Patton launched his offensive operations at El Guitar later in March, pushing toward the coast and beginning to restore American fighting confidence after the disaster at Kasserine Pass, the German commander opposing him was Jürgen von Arnim, not Rommel, who was already gone. They were in France nearly the same time as well. Rommel commanded Army Group B defending Normandy until July 17, 1944, when Allied aircraft strafed his staff car in Normandy back in July. He died a hero. Hitler ordered a national day of mourning. A lavish state funeral followed on October 18th. Field Marshal von Rundstedt delivered the eulogy before cameras and crowds. The world mourned a warrior. Almost nobody outside a handful of Nazi insiders knew they were actually witnessing the cover-up of a state murder. Rommel knew about Patton. German intelligence briefings identified Patton as the most dangerous American commander, the one most likely to cause serious problems.
The Germans were so convinced Patton would lead the main Allied invasion that they expected the landing at Calais rather than Normandy, a belief Allied deception operations deliberately encouraged. In papers published after the war, Rommel praised the August 1944 breakout across France as extraordinary mobile warfare. But he wrote that from a distance. He never experienced it from the opposite side of a battlefield. Patton respected Rommel's reputation and had studied his career. He understood that they shared tactical instincts, aggressive, fast-moving, offensive-minded, willing to take risks that more cautious commanders avoided. But respect for a reputation is not the same as a personal rivalry, and without a personal rivalry, there was no particular reason for Patton to eulogize the man. October 1944, the worst month of Patton's war. More than anything else, the context of October 1944 explains the silence. Patton was not in a reflective mood. He was in agony. After the spectacular success of August, when Third Army covered hundreds of miles in weeks, liberated entire regions of France, and made Patton a household name, everything had ground to a halt. The supply lines couldn't keep up with the advance. Fuel ran dry. On September 25th, Patton received orders to go on the defensive and stop moving forward. For a man who believed that stopping was always the wrong decision, this was torment. He focused his energy on Metz, the ancient fortress city blocking his path on the Moselle River. On October 3rd, Third Army attacked Fort Driant, one of the great stone fortresses protecting the city. The assault failed completely. American forces weren't trained or equipped for that kind of warfare. They suffered heavy casualties attacking positions they didn't fully understand. On October 13th, the day before Rommel died, Patton ordered the assault suspended. It was the only battle he lost in the entire war. It humiliated him. Rain fell constantly. The Moselle flooded. Roads became swamps. Tanks sat immobilized in mud. Over 1,000 Americans died in October alone, with thousands more wounded, all for minimal territorial gain. This was everything Patton despised about warfare: slow, grinding, costly, and inglorious. When the news of Rommel's death reached Third Army headquarters, Patton was consumed by Metz, by mud, by failure, by frustration. A German field marshal dying in Germany from reported war wounds was simply not relevant to any of that. There was nothing for Patton to say, and so Patton, for once, said nothing at all. The silence is the story. Two of history's most celebrated generals, seemingly destined to be great rivals, never actually fought each other in any meaningful way, and when one of them died, the other was too deep in the mud of Lorraine to notice or care. If you found that as fascinating as I do, subscribe and hit the like button, and drop a comment below if you have any family stories from the Second World War. I'd love to hear them.